In our Mishnah, we had a foundational machloket about how we think about a soneh, an enemy. Is an enemy a known risk, as Rabbi Yossi argued, in which case, if he kills, even if it seems accidental, he himself is killed, no questions asked? Or do we give the enemy the same benefit of the doubt we do for any other killer? We look at the circumstances and decide. The Gemara begins with an objection to Rabbi Yossi's position. Even if what he said makes logical or emotional sense, this is a legal system, and legal systems have rules of procedure. How can Rabbi Yossi allow the soneh to be killed without the due process of a warning? So first we're going to quote from the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi Omer HaSoneh Neharag. Rabbi Yossi says, the enemy killed. And then the Gemara says, Veha lo atrube. But wait a minute. They did not warn him. And the Gemara responds, don't worry, matnitin, our Mishnah, meaning Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehudahi. Our Mishnah follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda about what the nature is of a legal warning and why, in this case, perhaps it's not necessary. Tanya, as we learn in another Breita, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Omer, Chaver, someone who is known to be knowledgeable, Eino tzarich hatra'ah. That person does not actually need a warning. Because, lefi, shelo nitna hatra'ah ela lahavchin bein shogeg lemezid. Because hatra'ah was only given in order to distinguish between shogeg, someone who does something accidentally, lemezid, someone who does something with full intention and with full knowledge. In general, a warning in the Jewish legal system consists of the witnesses identifying themselves as witnesses, informing the person that what they are about to do is wrong, and what the penalty would be were they to violate it. According to the voice representing Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, there is a very specific reason why these witnesses deliver this information. This way, if the person then proceeds to perform the transgression, it is clear to them and everyone around them that they are doing it intentionally and with full knowledge of the consequences. A chaver, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda explains, presumably knows the law, and therefore, if they violate the law, we know that they are doing that with intention and full knowledge of the consequences. Therefore, they don't need to be warned. They already have that information. Similarly, you might say that someone who is a law professor doesn't actually need to be read their Miranda rights. They know them without being told. If we know that a person is a chaver, we know that they have the information necessary, even if the witnesses did not give it to them. We know that they are a mezid. Similarly, the Gemara argues on behalf of Rabbi Yossi, the soneh is categorically mezid. Since we don't need the witnesses to clarify this question, the soneh does not need to be given a proper warning, and therefore he can be put to death even without it. The second part of the Gemara discusses Rabbi Shimon's position. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon said that we look at the circumstances of the death, even when dealing with a soneh, and based on our analysis of what occurred, we make a determination about whether the soneh goes into galut or not. Our Gemara then introduces two other Tanaitic texts, two Breitot, in the name of Rabbi Shimon. Tanya, Ketzad, Amar Rabbi Shimon, Yesh soneh gola, v'yesh soneh she'eino gola. We have a Breita that asks, how do we work this out? Rabbi Shimon says, Yesh soneh gola, there's sometimes an enemy who does go into galut, v'yesh soneh she'eino gola, and sometimes there's an enemy that does not go into galut. Nifsak, if it's a case where it breaks, if there's a rope and the rope snaps, nifsak, in that case he goes into galut. Nishmat, however, if it slips out of his hand, eino gola, In that scenario, he does not go into galut because we are a little bit suspicious of how it could have just fallen out of his hand. In this first braita, Rabbi Shimon says that in the case of lowering a bucket, if the rope snaps, which is a freak accident that he really could not have planned, then we do consider it to be shogeg, and he does go into galut. However, if the rope slipped out of his hand, the chances that he, at least subconsciously, let go of the rope with the hope of causing harm are too high. If he is an enemy, we factor that into our evaluation of the case, and he does not have eligibility to go into galut. Remember, the case of lowering something was the standard for galut in the first Mishnah. If it's derech yeridato, I'm lowering the bucket, then you go into galut. However, for a sworn enemy, the case where the bucket slips is too likely to be at least somewhat intentional, so he may not go into galut. The Gemara then brings a second braita, also in the name of Rabbi Shimon. Vehatanya, but don't we have in a different braita, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Le'olam eino gola. Actually, he is never going to go into galut ad sheyishmat machatzalo miyado, until his mechtzal slips out of his hand. The word mechtzal does not appear anywhere else. In rabbinic literature, we know from context that probably what's being spoken about here is a very heavy stone that's used as a press that is held up by ropes. This second braita uses the same verb, shamat, which means to slip out. In the first braita's case, the rope is slipping out of the hands of the person who is pulling a bucket. In this braita, the mechtzal, a heavy slab of stone held up by ropes, causes someone to go into galut when he drops it. And then the Gemara says, wait a minute. These two braitot are in contrast with one another. Rabbi Shimon needs to have a consistent opinion, but kashya nifsak anifsak, but I have a challenge, I have a difficulty with one case of snapping versus another case of snapping. Kashya nishmat anishmat, and I also have a contradiction. I have a challenge between Rabbi Shimon's opinion in one case of nishmat, where the rope slips, and another case of nishmat, where the rope slips. The Gemara chimes in and says there is a contradiction between these two braitot. According to the first braita, when a rope snaps, the consequence is galut. But if he drops the rope, there is no galut. According to the second braita, the only situation where there is galut is if he drops the rope, which certainly implies that if the rope breaks, there is no galut. So which is it? Nifsak anifsak lo kashya. So then we say we can actually easily resolve the case of snapping, where the rope snaps. Lo kasha, that's not a contradiction. Ha be'ohev, ha besoneh. This case is in a situation when the perpetrator is a friend, and that case is when the perpetrator was an enemy. The Gemara explains that the case of the rope snapping is easy to explain along the axis of whether or not the person who had been holding the rope was a friend or an enemy. If the rope breaks with a soneh, that's the paradigmatic case of accidental, and the soneh would go into galut. However, with an ohev, a friend, the snapping of the rope is so unlikely, so accidental, that he wouldn't even have to go into galut. He would be considered too innocent to receive that consequence. Similarly, we say nishmat anishmat lo kasha. There's no contradiction in the two cases of where the rope slips. Ha Rebbe veha Rabbanan. In one of those braitot, Rabbi Shimon is channeling the opinion of Rebbe, and in one of those braitot, he is channeling the opinion of Rabbanan. So it is not a contradiction within himself, it is actually a reflection of a contradiction between two different people. resolving the contradiction between the cases where the rope leaves his hand entirely is a little bit complicated. Here, we don't say that it depends on his status as an enemy or not. It seems that the dropping of the rope entirely is suspicious even when you are an ohev. Therefore, the Gemara resolves the contradiction by appealing to the positions of Rebbe and Rabbanan in the first Mishnah of our chapter. That Mishnah discusses a different case of something slipping. Not a rope slipping from one's hand, but rather a blade slipping out of a hatchet. When I was in summer camp, I actually saw this happen with a 10-year-old lumberjack. In that Mishnah, Rebbe says that the wood chopper is not exiled, whereas the rabbis say that he does go into Galut. According to the resolution, when Rabbi Shimon is articulating his opinion about the case of Nishmat, where something slips out, he is not articulating it on his own terms. Rather, he is reflecting both sides of this dispute. In the first Braita, he is articulating what the law would be according to Rebbe. When something slips, the result is not exile. And the second Braita, where the mechzal falls, and the person who drops it is exiled, is according to the rabbis who say that a case of the axe head slipping off the handle results in exile. This is a bizarre conclusion. The case of nishmat, when the object falls from one's hands, is subject to subconscious motivations. The case of nifsak, where the rope snaps, is not subject to subconscious motivations. My muscles relax because of me. The rope snaps because of the rope. Therefore, it makes more sense to resolve the cases of nishmat, of slipping, on the axis of whether or not we are dealing with an enemy. The enemy is suspicious when he drops something, and a friend is not suspected when they drop it. And in fact, Rashi, Ritva, and others suggest that the text that we have in our Gemara is not correct. They argue that the case of Nishmat is the one that is resolved on the axis of whether or not the perpetrator is a soneh, and the case of Nifsak, when the rope breaks, is the one that is explained through recourse to the opinions of Rebbe and Rabbanan. According to this explanation, the case where the rope snaps is analogous to the case where the blade detaches from the hatchet. In both of those cases, something impacts the integrity of the object, making it dangerous in an unpredictable way. The dangerous component, the sharp blade or the heavy stone, gets separated from the part that the human being controls, the handle or the rope. And Rebbe and Rabbanan are arguing about this scenario. Is this a freak accident? Or is it anticipatable? If not due to actual negligence in properly maintaining one's tools. It seems that this error might have creeped in because of the language of Nishmat. Though the case of the flyaway axe head is not structurally similar to the case of the dropped bucket or rock, it is linguistically the same. They both use the root shin, mem, tet to slip out in both cases. But in this new reading, we are able to better understand the position of Rabbi Shimon. Even though he doesn't go as far as Rabbi Yossi in condemning the soneh to death, he still understands that there needs to be a different standard in evaluating the soneh's behavior. Certainly, he could be innocent, but there is also a distinct likelihood that he is guilty. We need to evaluate all of the aspects of the case, both what is happening physically, how did the accident happen, and psychologically, is it possible that the accident was caused by a hatred, either explicitly or subconsciously? This sugya urges us to be vigilant, not to trust our equipment without checking it, and also not to be sure that we know what we are or are not capable of. If we are capable of hatred, we are capable of taking that hatred to the next level. In our next session, we're going to move our attention away from the perpetrators 2, the punishment. What do these Arei Miklat, these cities of refuge, look like? Where are they? How does one get there? What do they look like?